Today, we're diving into a landmark legal case, Stonehill versus Diokno. This is a decision that truly shaped the right to privacy and the rules of evidence right here in the Philippines. So, here's how we're going to break it down. We'll start with the facts of the case, then get into the key legal questions that were raised. After that, we'll walk through the court's ruling, which actually has a few different parts, and unpack the core doctrine that came out of it. Finally, we'll look at the final decision and the lasting legacy of this case. Okay, let's begin with the facts. It all started with a series of massive raids, a huge government operation targeting several businessmen and the companies they ran. Government prosecutors went to court and got a staggering 42 separate search warrants issued against Harry Stonehill and his business associates. And these warrants, they were incredibly far-reaching. They were aimed not just at the individuals, Stonehill, the Brooks brothers, and Carl Beck, but also at a whole list of corporations they managed. The warrants gave agents the authority to search pretty much everywhere, their corporate offices, their warehouses, and even their private homes. The authority to seize things was just as broad. We're talking about books of accounts, financial records, correspondence, essentially any and all documents related to their business dealings. Well, as you can probably guess, the petitioners didn't take this sitting down. They immediately challenged the legality of all 42 of those warrants, taking their case directly to the Supreme Court. And that brings us to the central issue, the core question of the entire case. Were these searches and seizures actually constitutional? The petitioners argued that the warrants were null and void because they were issued in clear violation of the Constitution and the rules of court. At the heart of it all is this fundamental guarantee in our Constitution. It's the right to be secure in our persons, houses, papers, and effects from unreasonable searches and seizures. That word unreasonable is absolutely crucial here. Now, this is where the court's analysis gets really interesting. Before diving into the warrants themselves, the Supreme Court first split the seized items into two distinct categories based on where they were found. Here's the distinction they made. For items seized from the corporate offices, the court said the petitioners, the individuals, had no legal right to object. That right belonged exclusively to the corporations themselves. But for the items taken from their personal residences, that was a whole different story. The court found those searches were illegal, and the individuals absolutely had the right to object. This ruling comes down to a key legal concept, the doctrine of separate corporate personality. You see, the law treats a corporation as its own person, legally separate and distinct from its owners or officers. Because the right to object to an unlawful search is personal, you can't raise it on behalf of someone else. So Stonehill and his associates couldn't object on behalf of the corporations. They lacked the legal standing. Okay, so let's shift our focus now to the warrants themselves, specifically the ones covering the petitioners' homes, which the court did allow them to challenge. Why were they found to be invalid? The court found that these were classic examples of general warrants. And that's a major constitutional problem because this is precisely the kind of broad, sweeping warrant that the Constitution was designed to prohibit. The court pointed out a whole list of fatal flaws. The applications for the warrants didn't allege any specific offense. Instead, they just made a vague general claim about violations of multiple laws. This lack of specifics made it impossible for a judge to find probable cause for any particular crime. In essence, the warrants were a license for a fishing expedition, to just search everywhere and seize everything in the hopes of finding some evidence of some crime. And the Supreme Court did not mince words here. They stated very clearly that to allow warrants like these would be to wipe out completely a fundamental constitutional right, putting the privacy of every single home at the mercy of government officials. This now brings us to the most significant, game-changing part of the entire ruling. The court didn't just strike down the warrants, it established a powerful new legal doctrine for the whole country. You see, before this case, the prevailing rule came from a case called Mancado v. People's Court. That rule said that even if evidence was obtained illegally, it could still be used in court. In Stonehill, the Supreme Court explicitly and completely abandoned that doctrine. And in its place, the court formally adopted the exclusionary rule. This principle is simple but incredibly powerful. Evidence that is obtained through an unconstitutional search and seizure is inadmissible in any proceeding. You might have heard of it as the fruit of the poisonous tree doctrine. If the tree, the search, is poisoned, then its fruit, the evidence, is also poisoned and can't be used. So why make such a huge shift? The court explained that this was the only practical way to enforce the constitutional right. If the prosecution can't benefit from the results of an illegal search, then the incentive to violate the Constitution in the first place is removed. It's all about deterrence. So let's wrap this all up. What was the final judgment, and why is this case from all the way back in 1967 still so important for us today? In its final disposition, the court made its orders perfectly clear. The old Moncado doctrine was officially abandoned. The search warrants for the petitioners' homes we declared null and void. Because of that, all evidence seized from their residences was deemed illegal and could not be used in court, and that protection was made permanent. However, the part of the petition about the items from the corporate offices was dismissed because, as we discussed, the individuals lacked the legal standing to object. The key takeaway, the enduring doctrine from Stonehill v. Diokno, is that it firmly cemented the exclusionary rule into Philippine law. This case became the absolute bedrock for the right against unreasonable searches and seizures, giving real teeth to that constitutional guarantee. And the legacy of this case leaves us with a really fundamental question to think about. It shows that enforcing a right is just as important as having it written down. So it makes you wonder, if the best way to protect a right is to create a powerful deterrent against its violation, what other fundamental rights do we have that might depend on a shield just as powerful as the exclusionary rule?